Tonight on a very special edition of MUTV News, Election Day is finally here for MUSG President and Vice President.
And later on, a search for a president is finally over. All that and more, MUTV News election coverage starts right now.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Michael Biermeister.
And I'm Evan Peterson. The time is finally here for Marquette student government elections. But first, we throw it over to Teresa Lepowski, who is doing a bit of exit polling for MUTV News. Teresa, tell us what you have.
Tell them that.
When they received over 650 votes. This morning, starting off strong, the booths have seen a lot of action from the students since 9 a.m. Right now, we're looking at about a total of 1,400 votes. So, why the new voting booths? What are they going to do for us?
What we really wanted to try to do this year was make voting a little bit more visible for students. In the past, it's been kind of up to the candidates to solicit votes, so they've been outside the library, outside academic buildings, but we wanted to do a big push from MUSG itself in terms of voting. Our numbers were a little bit down this year, and we wanted to see them get picked up, and we thought a place for students to vote and then an incentive to do so would increase the numbers.
And how has the booth been doing today?
We've been doing pretty well. We had a steady stream of people all day. Obviously, it picked up around lunch, but people were initially like, do I want to vote? And then we told them they got $1 coffee, and a lot of people were interested.
With such a strong turnout this year, let's keep up the momentum, Marquette. I'm about to go vote right now and get my own free coffee. And I'll send it back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Teresa. Now it's time to get into Marquette University student government election coverage. For those of you who may be asking yourself, what is student government and how does it affect me? Well, it's simple. MUSG is a governing body comprised entirely of students that are democratically elected. They're a representation organization that operates as a medium through which to advocate on behalf of their constituents, the students. This organization is another organization of representation outside of student media. It is the primary source of representation at all levels of the Marquette's administration. Whether you're an incoming freshman or a second semester senior, this organization is making a decision that affects the lives of everyone on campus. And today, the election is a chance for students, that's you, to vote into office an upperclassman hoping to gain the reins of one of MUSG's most coveted positions, the president and the vice president.
That's right, Evan. And this year's MUSG election features 3 tickets running for the office of president and vice president. The ticket of Kyle Welton and Natalie Pinckney, the ticket of Tyler Tuckey and Rosie DeLuca, and finally the ticket of Zach Bowman and Marguerite Biaggi. All 3 tickets have been campaigning for the past few weeks by handing out cards, participating in debates, and even distributing donuts. We are going to give a brief preview of each ticket's background and a bit of their plans for office. So we're going to start things off with the ticket of Bowman and Biaggi. It features 2 juniors from the Colleges of Arts and Sciences. Zach is currently MUSG's executive vice president, while Marguerite is the current president of Alpha Phi sorority. For their platforms, Zach and Marguerite stress student advocacy for vacant positions, student organization fundraising, and an internal review of MUSG.
Now, Michael, the second ticket comprising of Tyler Tuckey, a junior in the College of Arts and Sciences, and the current program's vice president for MUSG. Tuckey is running alongside junior Rosie DeLuca, who is a double major in international business and marketing. The two have built a campaign around 3 core principles: academic reform, improving student life, and increasing transparency and student accountability for MUSG. Definitely a more traditional campaign platform, but nonetheless, it's still important.
Absolutely, Evan. I completely agree with everything you just said. But now for our last ticket of Kyle Welton and Natalie Pinckney. Evan, you had a chance to sit down and talk to them last night. What are their campaign building blocks?
You know, they're really, really nice. You know, they had those, obviously, that campaign. And one thing they definitely stressed was campus accountability and student representation, especially for minority groups on campus.
Yeah, and I heard the Marquette Tribune did a poll for the past couple of weeks. It had about 100 voters, and they gathered some data that showed that Welton and Pinckney were significantly out in the front. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, they were in the poll, according to the Marquette poll, 47.5% of the students that responded to this poll actually supported them as their president and vice president ticket. But as you mentioned, it was around 100 people, and that's not reflective of the entire student body that's going to be showing up to the ballot boxes. So this is, it's good to see that they're having support if you're on their campaign, but it's still too early to tell if this is going to be their winning seat.
Well, thank you for that, Evan. This year's race has definitely been different from races in the past years. We have quite a bit of diversity across all three tickets. To start off, Rosie DeLuca is the only member of any ticket to never be part of MUSG. The ticket believes that Rosie will bring a strong outside perspective that can help and shape a better Marquette community.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because definitely one of the biggest complaints about MUSG from the outside perspective is that they need people that aren't, for lack of a better word, tainted by the MUSG circuit. But Rosie is that fresh face, and that's definitely something they're counting on.
And it's just that new look that we're not used to, and it gives the students another opportunity to just kind of know that one of their own, not part of MUSG, is looking in and helping create a better Marquette student government.
Right, exactly. And what is unique about Weldon and Pigney in their ticket is that the campaign stresses diversity and minority representation at the executive level. And with Kyle and Natalie, this is exactly what you would get. Kyle is a traditional white Caucasian male, but Natalie, being not only an African-American woman, is definitely a minority group that people still feel needs to be represented. This ticket looks to challenge the expectations by getting a minority representation at the executive level. Again, that's something students are asking for, and this ticket definitely represents that.
Absolutely. And now to our final ticket, Marguerite Biaggi and Zach Bowman. Zach has recently come out openly homosexual man, and that is one strict change. It's a little different. He represents a very small but very unique part of Marquette's student body, and I really find that interesting. And I think that it could play well for them, and it will be a good idea to stress harder.
Right, and now we have Joe Cartoonist. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's good to be here.
Joe is the senior political analyst for the Marquette Tribune. He's been covering student government on their behalf, writing in their papers. If you've read anything from MUSG in the Tribune, you've seen it coming from Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on MUTV.
Like I said, it's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about the elections. You know the candidates. You've been doing a lot of work with me on getting to know who these people are. What do you think about them? What do you think about their initial impressions so far?
I think the most important thing to note about these three candidates is how similar they are. All three candidates were e-board members. They've all been with MUSG for a number of years. This is Kyle Welton's second year with it. Zach Bowman, I believe, is third. Same with Tyler Tuckey. And you guys both mentioned diversity. I think it's very interesting that they all chose women as their executive vice presidents, because there were no women on the executive board last year.
Now, what do you think about in terms of reaching out to minority groups? I mean, we saw Kyle, Natalie's African American, she's also a woman. Those are two minority groups that people have been stressing that needs to be on the executive level. But also you have Zach Bowman, who has come out numerous times in his campaign saying that, yes, I am homosexual, and that this is a group that does feel that they too have lost a voice somehow at the MUSG executive level.
Well, as far as Zach being homosexual, he has done a lot of work this year in terms of gender and sexuality. He's worked hard with the GSRC, as have a number of other senators. Natalie Pinkney worked on a diversity task force when she was a senator her freshman year from Cogan Hall. Yeah, so.
Joe, switching gears a little bit. Now, I observed their campaigns. They obviously have had a lot of similarities, but what differences have we seen in each of their campaigns?
Their primary differences is what they emphasize with their campaigns. So if you're somebody who's looking for somebody who's going to be a strong student advocate, they've all stressed that responsibility. If you're looking for somebody who's going to be big on outreach or reforming SOF or even just spending the reserve fund, they've all stressed these as part of their campaign, but they're focusing on different areas. For example, as far as SOF reform goes, Zach Bowman is focusing heavily on just implementing the reforms that will be coming from the ad hoc committee. Mm-hmm. Tyler Tuckey and Rosie DeLuca have called for there to be in-person advocacy on behalf of groups who are applying for SOF funding. And Kyle Welton has called for an external review of SOF in addition to the internal one that's going on right now. So it's the minor details like that across all the issues of the campaign that are really making the difference between the three candidates.
So as you're saying, it's not so much that their platforms are all too different. We're all seeing them kind of doing similar things, but it's about how they're going to go about it, which really sets them apart.
Exactly.
So now I know one other thing that was interesting too is during the debate we saw was the food desert comment. Zach Bowman really says, there's not much more we can make progress with that. But Kyle and Natalie, they're saying, we can, bring other options to it. It's not a completely closed off debate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's worth noting that Zach is very likely right. There will not be a major grocery store coming to this neighborhood, but that doesn't mean there's not options. And that's something that Kyle Welton and Natalie Pinckney have stressed. They've talked about online food delivery services, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Joe. I would sure love to have a grocery store on campus, but I know it's not going to be anytime soon. But now we're going to coming back later in the show to talk about the new president-elect and at the end of the program with some final thoughts. But now we're going to toss it over to Ritzy Martinez, who is prowling around Johnson Hall to get some opinions on voting in this year's election. Ritzy?
Hi, I'm Ritzy Martinez, and today we just went around campus asking students who they voted for the MUSG election.
I haven't voted, but I'm going to vote for Kyle Welton and Natalie Pinckney, and that's because I've known Kyle for 2 years now. He's a really close friend, and I think they're the two most qualified candidates. And I know they're passionate about what they're going to do with the new administration, and I'm excited about it. So I really hope they win.
I voted for Kyle and Natalie because they were the most visible on campus throughout this whole week, and they really showed a passion for Marquette that they would really represent the student body.
I voted for Kyle Welton for MUSG president because he came to talk to our dorm yesterday at O'Donnell, and I like what he had to say about club sports and their funding.
For president, Zach Bowman and Biaggi, I remember the first name. Because I've seen Zach be very involved, and it's a face that I easily recognize and see what he's doing on campus.
Those were some of the opinions for the MUSG presidential election. I'm Ritzy Martinez for MUTV News.
That, Ritzy. Coming up after the break, MUTV's Colleen Black has some reactions to the new president.
And still ahead, MUTV's Aaron Mabin sits down with MUSG election coordinator. So don't change the channel because MUTV News will be right back. Welcome back to MUTV News' election coverage show. Earlier today, MUTV News sent out reporter Aaron Mabin to the Alumni Memorial Union to cover the surprise announcement of Marquette's new president. Aaron, what do you have for us?
Marquette University has a new president. It was announced early this morning that Dr. Michael Lovell will be the 24th president of the university. In an email, the Board of Trustees said that it was a unanimous vote that the chancellor from UWM will be the president. New university president Dr. Michael Lovell addressed a packed union conference room of students, staff, alumni, and family members Wednesday afternoon.
I stand before you today. I'm very, very humbled and honored to be announced as Marquette's 24th president.
Lovell is the first layman to head the university and made it clear that he isn't the most knowledgeable about the Jesuit education. However, the devout Catholic didn't shy away from his willingness to learn and love of his faith.
And so after hours of meditation and actually several sleepless nights, it became clear to me that I was being called to Milwaukee 6 years ago to ultimately become Marquette's first lay president. And it was never my plan, but one that God had laid out for me.
Before today, students had been without a president for more than 6 months. Junior College of Business student Andrew Terenzio says that it's about time and looks forward to all that Lovell has to offer.
It's an exciting time. I know that there's been a lot of build-up in terms of the open positions at Marquette, and people have been really anxious about this, and it's a good day now that it's come.
Chuck Svoboda is the chair of the Marquette Board of Trustees and was part of the Presidential Search Committee. Out of the 1,200 candidates on the list, he says that Lovell really stood out from the pack and will set a precedent for the university.
I think the best way to describe it is this is a chance to really set the stage for that next chapter of our history.
After his brief speech, Lovell met and took pictures with students in the union, not just getting his feet wet, but already jumping into the Marquette pool. And Dr. Lovell's first day in office is August 1st, and he already has things planned out for him and his staff. Live in Milwaukee, Aaron Maben, MUTV News.
Well, thanks for coming on to the show today, Aaron. It's
having
nice to see you again, as always. But so just a couple of questions. How was the atmosphere when Dr. Lovell came in and spoke? How was that? Can you describe a little bit of that?
It was definitely electric. I walked into that room with my camera, and I was really hit with this electricity. It was really great to see 277, which is a smaller room, packed. I even think if we were in the ballrooms, it would be really packed up there, too. Everyone had a great question to ask because he had an open forum at the end of his speech. And it was just a great environment to be around all those alum, all those staff, and students, most importantly, too.
Well, absolutely. I wish I could have been there. It sounded exciting. It would be awesome to see, a new generation, a different, a different president than what we're traditionally used to.
And then even to speaking to Chairperson Swoboda, who was kind of chaired this committee, he said that this is going to be very historic because he is the first layman president. All the presidents before, the 23 presidents before, have always been a Jesuit. And just by the way, the Jesuits don't really train each other how to be university leaders. So years ago, we thought about having a layman, and now we finally have one.
And I know you talked a little bit about the environment, but I got to imagine as a student, when you went in there, when they said, "Here is our new president," there was a big sigh of relief. Did you find that to be true?
There definitely was. I got to talk to a few students. Two that really stood out for me was one who was a runner. This new president is a marathon runner, so all these students are really excited to run with that president because at his last university, he would run with students just to learn what's going on and how he can fix things too. Also, I was able to speak to a student that's really into the environment, and Dr. Lovell did a lot of things at UWM, whether it was water conservation, whether it was energy efficient buildings, and they're excited to bring that to Marquette too.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your experience with us, Aaron. We really appreciate it. Now, Evan, I would love to run a marathon with my university president. How would you feel about that?
I would like to as well, but could I? That's a totally different thing. I would like to. There's no way I could. I would be down on the ground after the first 2 miles.
Well, it's a lot of work, but, I think if you push down and trained hard, you could get through it. But now we welcome Joe, cartoonist, back to the panel. We're going to talk a little bit about the new president, and how he's been reestablished, or not reestablished, but put back into. We finally have somebody there to depend on.
Yeah.
Finally.
Joe, this is something that's been happening a little over 6 months now, and this is arguably a game changer for the whole university, but also student government. Tell me, when you hear that Marquette's getting a new president, what does that mean to you?
Well, it means to me that we're finally going to have really stable leadership. And as far as student government goes, I actually spoke with Sam Schultz earlier after he talked to the president. He was really positive. He said the president had a lot of energy and was really excited to get to work with students. And if there were any lingering concerns over the issues with student government at UWM, that's not really a concern among student government at Marquette.
Now, there's a variety of vacant positions right now, and we finally have filled the biggest one, the president. What effect will that have on filling these other, positions? The dean of admissions, athletic director, new basketball coach. There's quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Well, the biggest thing is that candidates will finally know who they're going to be working for.
And that certainly helps if you're coming in to take a position. It helps to know who your boss is.
Oh, absolutely. It's very tough to be willing to say that I'm going to devote my life to a place when I don't know who I'll be working with or who I'll be working for.
Yeah, and there's also kind of an issue of coming in and say someone were to come in and not know who their boss is. There's almost kind of like a feeling of seniority that you feel like, I've been here longer, but yet now I'm having to answer to this guy. That's kind of an uncomfortable work environment.
Yeah, it is. I think the biggest concern is just trying to figure out who you're going to be beholden to as an employee.
Now, can you tell us any initial impressions from the newsroom downstairs?
The newsroom downstairs is generally positive. We're fairly excited that there's a new president, and I'm sure they're all really busy downstairs prepping the issue for tomorrow.
And he seems like a relatively young guy, since we're used to older Father Wild, and he's very eccentric, a lot of energy. Can you tell us a little bit more about how his energy may shift some different policies?
I don't think there will be much policy shifting going on. As I understand it, the university does plan to stick with the long-term plan that was established by Father Polars. Again, I think the biggest thing will be that there is finally somebody permanent. It will help with fundraising for the university, things like
Right.
that, of that nature first.
Now, very briefly, we're running a little short on time before we go on to the break. But in terms of student government, do you think this is going to be a new chance with the new president to get more advocacy on campus in terms of elections?
It's hard to say right now. It's important to note that with student government, the president isn't the only person they're talking to. They are still in connection with many people in the provost's office and the vice president's office and all the deans. So as far as what will change, it's hard to see. It depends on how hands-on the new president plans to be.
Well, thank you for that, Joe. But before we take a break, Dr. Lovell has already started to embrace the Marquette community. Check out his first ever Marquette selfie. It's absolutely beautiful and stupendous. I mean, this guy is truly embracing the Marquette community, and I'm pretty pumped about it.
We found it a couple hours before the show, and it already had over 100 retweets and a lot of favorites. And I think, you know, in terms of jumping right into the Marquette community, presidential selfie is a good way to do it. Way to start it off.
Yeah, well, following Ellen is always a good idea, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, make sure you stay tuned because we're going to be right back after the break. So don't touch that channel changer.
Welcome back to MUTV News. And Joe, we're still talking to you. You're not going anywhere. It's getting down to the end of the program, and we wouldn't be doing right by our viewers if we didn't ask you to help make some predictions about what we know about the voting process so far. And come tomorrow when the results come in, who can we expect to be the next president and vice president?
Well, I don't like to speculate too much without having all the facts, but
responsible journalist in you.
But from being around MUSG today, I know a lot of the senators are supporting Kyle Welton. A lot of people I've talked to have been supporting Kyle Welton, and obviously the poll we did wasn't a fully representative sample, but that said Kyle Welton. So if I were to venture a guess, it would be Kyle Welton.
Joe, in terms of the turnout, last year was a little bit of a mumbo-jumbo, a little bit of hectic. We had a lot of scandals going on. What do you expect for this year? Do you expect it to be a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower?
Well, I've actually been in contact with MUSG Communications Vice President Alex Lahr. He told me that they already beat last year's voter turnout.
Wow.
Which was 20%, which was still much lower than they're normally used to having. But they fully expect it to be very high, possibly approaching their all-time record.
Now, when you say 20%, you're saying 20% of the entire student body, correct?
20% of the eligible student body. Not all students are eligible to vote for a variety of reasons, but yes, 20% of the eligible voting student body.
So, and there's still time to vote. So there's still a lot of time left in the evening. So for those of you who haven't voted, you guys still have a chance to go out there and be part of MUSG voting history.
Potentially, yes.
So is there anything else that you said you think Kyle and Natalie are going to possibly be our next president, vice president? But how come, why do you think that is? What does that say about the Bowman ticket and the Tucky ticket?
I'm not sure if it's as much a referendum on the Bowman ticket or the Tucky ticket as much as it is credit to the opinion that people hold of Kyle Welton, as much as it's a credit to how they campaigned. They were very active on social media, more so than the Bowman ticket or the Tucky ticket. I will say, though, that if it is a referendum on Zach Bowman, it is entirely likely that it's because he has been the chair of the SOF committee, which is always controversial.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for stopping by, Joe. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show tonight and you sharing your MUSG knowledge with us. But from all of us here at MUTV News, I'm Michael Biermeister.
And I'm Evan Peterson. Thank you very much for coming by and checking out the election show.